This is the Music Halls of Fame podcast. This week we look at the year 2003 along with a member of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame class of 2003. We also make the case for putting the alternative indie rock group Husker into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Plus, our spotlight museum is the Museum of Broadway in New York City. Before we get going with the podcast, like everyone tells you, please like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you'll know when these podcast episodes drop, which is usually every Thursday. Now, on to this week's episode. This week, we are going to look at the case for putting Husker into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Back in the 1980s, there was an indie band that came out of Minnesota called Husker. That's Husker, and the second name is spelled D-U for some of you who aren't reading the subtitles. Anywho, between 1983 to 1987, Husker put out 6 albums. 3 of their 4 indie albums did very well on the UK indie charts. Their debut album, 1983's Everything Falls Apart, did not chart. However, 1984's Zen Arcade went to number 11, 1985's New Day Rising went to number 10, and 1985's Flip Your Wig also went to number 1. Then they switched gears and signed with Warner Brothers Records and released 1986's Candy Apple Grey and 1987's Warehouse, Songs and Stories. Both of their major label albums went top 140 in America, but neither went to the top 100. They also released 4 live albums, 3 EPs, and 3 compilation albums. They also released 10 singles, 2 of which hit the UK indie charts, with 1984's 8 Miles High hitting number 22 and 1985's Makes No Sense at All going to number 2. None of their albums or singles actually hit the American charts in earnest, which is why the vast majority of you listening to this have probably never even heard of them. However, Husker were led by influential guitarist-singer Bob Mould, along with bassist Greg Norton and drummer Grant Hart. And they started out as a hardcore punk band and then switched sounds to more alternative rock. They were considered one of the most important American indie bands of the 1980s, even though they went the corporate route with the last 2 albums. Among their many, many admirers and bands that have been influenced by their hardcore yet melodic sound were Nirvana, the Pixies, and the Smashing Pumpkins, just to name a scant few. Unfortunately, their lack of chart success will probably keep them out of the Hall for a little longer. However, the Hall does need to start recognizing the indie bands who influenced the punk and alternative sounds of the 1980s and 90s. And because of their influence, Husker deserves to be among the greats of punk and indie rock in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And to prove it, we have put their music onto this week's podcast playlist, the link to which is in the show notes. Before we go any further, we'd like to tell you that there is now a Music History In-Depth podcast where we go more in depth on a few of the events that happened in music history for that particular week. The Music History In-Depth podcast drops every Tuesday on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast from, as does our Music History Today podcast, which goes over the daily events in music history. The Music History Today podcast drops daily, including weekends, on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Now, back to this podcast. The year was 2003. In music for that year, producer Phil Spector was arrested and later convicted for the death of actress Lana Clarkson. Michael Jackson was also arrested that year on child molestation charges. He would later be found not guilty, at least in a court of law. Not quite in public opinion, though. A fire in a nightclub in Rhode Island claimed 100 lives when pyrotechnics set off during a performance by the group Great White set the nightclub on fire, quickly spreading and then trapping the people inside. The Dixie Chicks, now known as the Chicks, created controversy when they came out against the Iraq War, which at the time had high public approval ratings that would later change. The iTunes Store opened online on April 28th of that year, saving the music industry from itself finally. The Record Industry Association of America started suing fans who downloaded music illegally. Singles didn't sell as much overseas, as 2003 was the first year that no single sold over 1 million copies in the United Kingdom. Celine Dion started a trend when she started her residency shows in Las Vegas. Pop and rock stars doing month-long and multi-year concert runs in casinos in Las Vegas at the height of their careers would soon become the norm, no longer the exception. Groups that were formed in 2003 included Equilibrium, the Cheetah Girls, Chloe and Halle, Gnarls Barkley, Nina Sky, Ramses, and the Pussycat Dolls. Groups who either broke up or took their extended breaks in 2003 until, of course, their inevitable reunions included BB Mac, Black Flag, Men Without Hats, Pantera, The Cranberries, Quiet Riot, Propellerheads, Remy Zero, The Righteous Brothers, The Rollins Band, S Club 7, Gangstar, Gravity Kills, Seville, The Stone Temple Pilots, Suede, Winger, and Wild Orchid. As usual, a bunch of those groups got back together for a tour or two. Groups that officially got back together in 2003, though, were the Stooges and Edge of Sanity. 50 Cent had the biggest album of the year on the pop charts, at least, with Get Rich or Die Trying. Other big albums were Norah Jones's Come Away With Me, Michael Jackson's Number Ones, the Dixie Chicks' Home, Linkin Park's Meteora, Evanescence's Fallen, Beyoncé's debut solo album, Dangerously in Love, Christina Aguilera's Stripped, Britney Spears' In the Zone, Avril Lavigne's Let Go, and Coldplay's A Rush of Blood to the Head. 50 Cent also scored the number one single of 2003 on the Hot 100 singles chart with In the Club. Other hit songs were R. Kelly's Ignition, Sean Paul's Get Busy, Beyonce and Jay-Z's Crazy in Love, Three Doors Down's When I'm Gone, Matchbox 20's Unwell, Chingy's Right There, Aaliyah's Miss You, Kid Rock and Sheryl Crow's Picture, and Evanescence's Bring Me to Life. In country music, Toby Keith, Brenda Lee, Joe D. Messina, Leanne Rimes, Trace Adkins, and Alan Jackson all had best-selling greatest hits albums. Other big country albums that were released included Buddy Jewell's self-titled album, Chris Cagle's self-titled album, Daryl Worley's Have You Forgotten, George Strait's Honky Tonkville, Martina McBride's Martina, Brad Paisley's Mud on the Tires, Brooks and Dunn's Red Dirt Road, and Winona's What the World Needs Now Is Love. Alan Jackson and Jimmy Buffett had the biggest country hit of the year with It's 5 O'Clock Somewhere. Other big country singles included Mark Wills's 19-something, Blake Shelton's The Baby, Toby Keith and Willie Nelson's Beer for My Horses, Joe Nichols' Broken Heartsville, Diamond Rio's I Believe, Gary Allen's Man to Man, and Tough Little Boys, Lone Star's My Front Porch Looking In, Tim McGraw's Real Good Man, Kenny Chesney's There Goes My Life, and Randy Travis's Three Wooden Crosses. In hip-hop, the biggest album, of course, was 50 Cent's Get Rich or Die Trying. Other big albums, though, included Outkast's Grammy Award-winning album Speakerboxxx The Love Below, Jay-Z's The Black Album, Tupac's Tupac Resurrection, Ludacris's Chicken and Beer, G-Unit's Beg for Mercy, DMX's Grand Champ, The Neptunes' The Neptune Presents Clones, Obi Trice's Cheers, and the Bad Boys 2 movie soundtrack. As far as singles went, 50 Cent's In the Club was the biggest, but he also had competition from himself, specifically the songs 21 Questions, PIMP, and Wanksta. Other hits included Ludacris's Stand Up, Lil' Kim's Magic Stick, Chingy's Holiday Inn, also One Call Away, and also Right There. Nelly's Air Force One's, Jay-Z's Excuse Me Miss, Busta Rhymes and Mariah Carey's I Know What You Want, Fabulous's Can't Let You Go and also Into You, Youngblood's Damn, Pharrell Williams' Frontin', and a song by legendary wrestler Randy Muscle Man Savage called Remember Me, which went to number 1. Seriously. Yes, that happened. Go figure. In dance music, Music Magazine stopped publishing a hard copy magazine and went totally digital. Tiesto started the trend of DJs doing solo stadium and arena shows. On the dance charts, the usual pop and R&B crossover artists who had hits were actually a rather eclectic bunch this year. Among them were Madonna, Mariah Carey, Justin Timberlake, Seal, Pink, Michael Jackson, Daniel Bedingfield, Jewel, along with Elvis Presley and the Rolling Stones. Yes, you heard that right. DJ Paul Oakenfold did a remix of Elvis's song Rubberneckin', and there was a remix of the Stones' classic Sympathy for the Devil, and both of those hit number 1 on the dance charts. As far as the more legit quote-unquote dance artists, other than DJ Paul Oakenfold, you had the Weekend Players, Freeland, Paul Van Dyke, Bob Sinclair, Darude, Boomcat, Christine W., Anastasia, Robbie Rivera, BT, The Funky Green Dogs, Laura Pausini, Chris Cox, not to be confused with Carl Cox, Becky Bailing, and Deborah Cox, also not confused with Carl or Chris Cox. And all of those had big dance hits. Probably the longest lasting song of 2003 in terms of both impact on radio and in DJ and festival mixes to this very day is Benny Benassi's classic electro house anthem, Satisfaction. The top 10 DJs on DJ Mag's Top 100 DJs poll were Tiesto, Paul Van Dyke, Armin van Buuren, Sasha, John Digweed, Ferry Corsten, Carl Cox, Paul Oakenfold, Judge Jules, and Deep Dish. In Latin music, Juanes was the biggest act of the year, but also having very good years on the Latin charts were Celia Cruz, Ricky Martin, Shakira, Cumbia Kings, Ricardo Arjona, and La India. Broadway musicals and revivals of musicals that opened in 2003 included Wicked, Avenue Q, Bells, 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 Bounce, Caroline or Change, The Full Monty, Jerry Springer the Opera, Never Gonna Dance, Show Tune, Taboo, Thoroughly Modern Millie, The Boy from Oz, Fame on 42nd Street, and Tonight's the Night. Musical movies, concert films, and documentaries for the year included Brother Bear, Camp, End of the Century, The Story of the Ramones, From Justin to Kelly, The Jungle Book 2, Love Under the Sun, A Mighty Wind, School of Rock, The Singing Detective, and Tupac Resurrection. Artists who were born in 2003 included Olivia Rodrigo, The Kid Laroi, Bad Bobby, Jojo Siwa, Tate McRae, Blanco, and Paulina Bogasevich. Artists who unfortunately passed away in 2003 included country music superstar Johnny Cash, his wife June Carter Cash, Maurice Gibb of the Bee Gees, singer and songwriter Warren Zevon, Howie Epstein of Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers, country music singer Johnny Paycheck, jazz songstress Nina Simone, R&B singer-songwriter Edwin Starr, Noel Redding of the Jimi Hendrix Experience, flute player Herbie Mann, entertainer extraordinaire Mr. Bob Hope, the founder of Sun Studios, Sam Phillips, entertainer Gregory Hines, entertainer Donald O'Connor, the maestro of love himself, Mr. Barry White. Sure you're right. The Queen of Salsa, Celia Cruz, country music singer Slim Dusty, singer Hank Ballard, singer Robert Palmer, singer-songwriter Elliott Smith, popular symphony conductor Michael Kamen, and also TV and film score writer, I might add. Country music singer Don Gibson, singer Bobby Hatfield, and rappers Sabotage, Camouflage, Half a Mill, and Soulja Slim. In awards for the music of 2003, Outkast became the first hip-hop act to win the Grammy Award for Best Album for Speakerboxxx The Love Below. Coldplay won Record of the Year for Clocks. Luther Vandross and Richard Marx won Song of the Year for Dance with My Father, and Evanescence won Best New Artist, which had another one of those really awkward moments when fellow New Artist nominee 50 Cent went up on stage when Evanescence won. Basically, he wanted to complain about it. Really. Pulling another Kanye. At the American Music Awards, Madonna won Artist of the Year. At the Billboard Music Awards, 50 Cent won Artist of the Year. At the MTV Video Music Awards, Madonna kissed Britney Spears and Christina Aguilera, which was all anybody could talk about on that show. But aside from that, the Video of the Year went to Missy Elliott for Work It. Outkast won Album of the Year at the Soul Train Music Awards, and Beyoncé and Faith Hill won the music categories at the People's Choice Awards. At the Eurovision Song Contest, which was held that year in Riga, Latvia, Sertab Erener from the country of Turkey won for the song Every Way That I Can. Alan Jackson won Entertainer of the Year at the Country Music Association Awards, and Toby Keith won Entertainer of the Year at the Academy of Country Music Awards. The Darkness won Best British Album for Permission to Land, and Dido won Best Song for White Flag at the Brit Awards. Sam Roberts won Best Album for We Were Born in a Flame, while Nelly Furtado won Best Song for Powerless, Say What You Want at the Juno Awards. Powderfinger won Album of the Year for Vulture Street, and Delta Goodrem won Song of the Year for Born to Try at the ARIA Music Awards. At the Tony Awards, Hairspray won Best Musical and Nine won Best Revival of a Musical. The Pulitzer Prize for Music that year was won by John Adams for On the Transmigration of Souls. No, not the second president of the United States, John Adams. Different guy. Musically, at the Academy Awards, the movie The Return of the King won both music categories, with the song from the movie Into the West winning Best Song and Howard Shore winning Best Original Score. Dizzy Rascal won the Mercury Music Prize for the album Boy in the Corner, becoming the first rapper to win that prize. The 2003 Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction ceremony was held on March 10th that year at the Waldorf Astoria Hotel in New York City. During the ceremony, the hall inducted drummer Benny Benjamin, pianist Floyd Kramer, and saxophonist Steve Douglas into the Sidemen category. Record executive Mo Austin was inducted into the non-performers category. As far as the performers category went, the induction class was stacked that year with popular talent as artists AC/DC, The Righteous Brothers, The Clash, The Police, and this next group went into the performers category. Declan Patrick McManus was born on August 25, 1954 in London, England. Both of his parents were in the music industry, although through different means. His mother worked in a record store while his father was a jazz trumpet player. He ended up living in Liverpool, England, when he was a kid. During his childhood, he developed his love of music, except that he wasn't too sure about pursuing it because of the troubles that he saw his parents go through in the industry. Even as he decided to finally go for it, Declan still kept his job as a computer operator and clerk at a bank until he put out his first solo album. In 1972, while still in Liverpool, he joined a folk rock group called Rust, who put out a couple of very quick albums. By 1973, Declan was sick of Liverpool and wanted to move back to London. He arranged a transfer to a new bank in London so that he would have money while he pursued his dream. He also started going by the name Declan Costello, as Costello was an old family performing name and was much easier to spell and pronounce than McManus, which is, by the way, spelled M-A-C-M-A-N-U-S. Yep, Costello was a good call. He joined a band called Flip City, but no one in Flip City was serious about having a music career, so Declan left. And for the next few years, Declan worked around town as D.F. Costello and pounded the pavement, doing gigs and perfecting his songwriting skills. He also got married and had a kid. In 1976, Declan and his family moved closer to the Heathrow International Airport portion of London so that they could save some money. He also found out about the punk rock scene, which absolutely positively changed his career and life path. He also managed to get a demo tape into the right hands at an independent record label called Stiff Records in 1976. And while working on his first album, he used the band Clover as his backup band. In 1977, Declan debuted with his solo album My Aim Is True, which was produced by Nick Lowe. And just when he was about to release that album, he decided to form a band called The Attractions. He got Bruce Thomas on bass guitar, Pete Thomas for drums, and Steve Mason for keyboards. Steve was given the stage name Steve Naive by music artist Ian Drury for Steve's naivety. With this group, Elvis, as he was now calling himself, did a quick tour to promote his solo album. One of those tour stops was on Saturday Night Live, where he and the band were a replacement for the act that was supposed to perform that night, the Sex Pistols. Elvis was a big fan of Jimi Hendrix. He was especially a fan of something Hendrix did on television. Once, during a TV performance, Hendrix stopped playing the song he was supposed to and started playing the song that he really wanted to play, much to the chagrin of everybody on that stage at that time. Elvis thought that it would be a great idea to do that for this show. So, on December 17th, he stopped playing the song Less Than Zero right in the middle of the song and started playing Radio Radio, a song the television network NBC and Saturday Night Live executive producer Lorne Michaels told him not to perform. That incident got him banned from the show, supposedly for life, but he'd be back on in 1989. The stunt/tribute to Hendrix did get him a lot of exposure and a rep as rock's next angry young man. During this time, he and The Attractions started work on the second album. It was recorded for the most part at Eden Studios in London. The recording sessions themselves were largely uneventful. That album, This Year's Model, was released on March 17, 1978. The songs continued Elvis's trend of mixing punk, pop, rock, new wave, and ballads. The big songs off the initial release of that album were Chelsea, Lipstick Vogue, and Pump It Up, which still gets played at sports stadiums worldwide to psych up the crowd. Other worldwide releases of the album added songs like Elvis's ode to people's fascinations with watching crime on television, called Watching the Detectives. Chart-wise, the album went to number 30 in America, but it went to number 4 in England and was the 39th biggest selling record of that year in England. After that, Elvis Costello and The Attractions released the albums Armed Forces, Get Happy, Trust, Almost Blue, Imperial Bedroom, Punch the Clock, and Goodbye Cruel World. And then Elvis did an album with both The Attractions and a new backup band called the Confederates. Then did another album with The Attractions in 1986 called Blood and Chocolate, while The Attractions did their own album without Elvis. Then, that was it with The Attractions, actually. Well, at least until 1994, when they recorded another album called Brutal Youth, and 1996's All This Useless Beauty. Pete Thomas and Steve Naive continued backing up Elvis on a lot of his albums, while Bruce Thomas quit due to a falling out between himself and Elvis. In fact, when The Attractions were inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, Bruce didn't play with the group during the ceremony. When asked why, Elvis said that he only plays with professional musicians. Ouch. Don't hold back, Elvis. Tell them how you really feel. During their run, The Attractions didn't have a lot of hits on the American pop charts. In fact, even though a lot of their songs are now classic radio staples, chart-wise, Elvis Costello and The Attractions wouldn't have a huge hit in America until 1983 with Every Day I Write the Book, thanks to the video playing in heavy rotation on MTV. Still, they are considered one of the greatest rock groups to come out of Great Britain in the late 1970s and early 1980s, with classic rock songs like Watching the Detectives, Pump It Up, What's So Funny About Peace, Love, and Understanding, Allison, Less Than Zero, and The Only Flame in Town, which also had Daryl Hall as, I believe, co-writer and backup vocals on that one. Presented for induction by 1994 Rock and Roll Hall of Fame inductees Sir Elton John, Elvis Costello, Pete Thomas, Steve Naive, a.k.a. Steve Mason, and Bruce Thomas. Elvis Costello and The Attractions, inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame class of 2003, and we have put their greatest hits onto this week's podcast playlist. The link, as I said before, is in the show notes. There is a museum in the heart of Times Square in New York City that is dedicated to the history of Broadway shows that you may not be aware of. The Museum of Broadway is at 145 West 45th Street between 6th and 7th Avenue. The museum opened within the past couple of years and has memorabilia from such shows as Wicked, Hamilton, etc., etc. The museum is open Monday through Friday, 9:30 a.m. to 6:30 p.m., Saturdays from 9:30 a.m. to 8 p.m., and Sundays from 9:30 a.m. to 6:30 p.m. Ticket prices are actually kind of expensive as far as museum tickets go. General admission is from $34 to $41. Flexible entry is $49. Daily anytime entry is $69. Seniors are $32 and students are $29. They do, however, have reduced prices for the first Tuesday of every month and their museum matinee, which is Wednesday from 12:30 to 4:30 p.m. They now also have reduced ticket prices for New York City residents. Museumofbroadway.com is their website for more information on reduced ticket prices and also for the ticket prices as of this very second, because of course, this being New York City, things change rather rapidly. I will put that link, by the way, down in the show notes. You don't have to remember that. Now, what if I told you that a now famous Broadway show got popular because of an album? You would say, well, yeah, that happens all the time. Green Day and American Idiot, for instance. True, but shows like that were adapted only after the album, like American Idiot, or movie, insert virtually any other Disney movie here, like Little Mermaid, Frozen, etc., or songbook, like, say, Billy Joel or Motown or Carole King, became rather popular. This next story, though, is about how a Broadway show became popular because it was purposely marketed as an album first, with the Broadway show being the end game in all of it. Back in the late 1960s, Andrew Lloyd Webber and Tim Rice had a show called Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat. You may have heard of it, but at the time it wasn't all that popular, playing mainly in churches all throughout England. Undeterred, though, they decided to work on what would be their third musical with an uncontroversial subject matter that people would flock to like crazy: Jesus Christ. Yeah, no controversy there. And just to kick that up just a tiny bit, they concentrated the story on Judas. Okay, still, no controversy whatsoever. Who would even think that? Nah, let's take it even further and now decide not to portray Judas as a villainous backstabber, but as someone who was bothered with the fact that Jesus had a massive following and was becoming a celebrity, or I guess a Jesus complex? I guess, sort of. He was entitled. I mean, it was named after him. Still, that shouldn't stop anyone from backing this new venture, should it? After all, it's the 1960s, free love, hippies, and all that stuff that you've been taught in history class. Surely people would fork over money for this. Yeah, no, not even close. Financial backers were shockingly not ready to fork over millions for this kind of an idea. Go figure. Who'd have thunk it? Andrew and Tim were kind of stuck. How could they get people to back this new Broadway show? At the time, just a show. Then they got an idea. Since the music was so good, how about they put out the cast concept album first, just to whet everybody's appetite so that they're not so afraid of the whole thing. With that in mind, they gathered up a cast that included some people who would later become famous on their own. Singer Helen Reddy, who would have a huge hit with the song I Am Woman. Murray Head, who had the big hit One Night in Bangkok off of the Chess Broadway soundtrack. And Yvonne Elliman, who did the singing for If I Can't Have You from the Saturday Night Fever soundtrack. That song became a huge hit. They recorded the album in September of 1969, and then on September 10th, 1970 in England and October 27th, 1970 in America, they released their album. The reaction, as you would expect from virtually anything that Weber and Rice has ever done, was not met kindly by the critics. They trashed it. The BBC, for its part, actually banned the album, calling it sacrilegious. Didn't matter. The album did its job. It became a huge smash and got the public excited for the Broadway show, which by then had found financial backing, although it was for, I believe, the English show first. In July of 1971, after finding the financial backing that it needed finally, the musical production of Jesus Christ Superstar had its first official run. Not on Broadway, not even in London, but at the Civic Arena in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, where they staged it as a concert, not a show. By the fall of 1971, the production had become so popular that unauthorized productions started popping up all over America, from Washington, D.C. to Los Angeles. The official Broadway production opened on October 12, 1971 at the Mark Helliger Theater on 237 West 51st Street. The theater was named after journalist Mark Helliger and at one time had been a movie theater. Jeff Fenholt played Jesus Christ. Ben Vereen and Carl Anderson both played Judas, switching off when one needed a break or became ill. Paul Ainsley played Herod. Barry Dennen played Pontius Pilate. And Yvonne Elliman, who I mentioned just a few minutes ago, actually was in the Broadway production playing Mary Magdalene. The critics were kind of split on the production at first. Some Christians called it blasphemous, while Jewish leaders weren't exactly thrilled with it either. For others, it was the fact that two African Americans played Judas. No matter. The production went on to be nominated for 5 Tony Awards, including Best Score, although it didn't win any of them. It did, however, win a Drama Desk Award and a Theatre World Award. It then went to London at the Palace Theatre in 1972 and other places from there. It was also adapted into a film in 1973 that was nominated for numerous Golden Globe Awards. Just goes to show you that sometimes you kind of have to bet on yourself and your own dreams and just come up with a different way of doing things in order to get those dreams accomplished. Jesus Christ Superstar, whose mementos you can find in the Museum of Broadway in New York City. The Music Halls of Fame podcast is part of the Music History Today network, which can be found under Music History Today on Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, or wherever you get your podcast from, and also on our YouTube page under Music History Today. Thank you very much for listening.